This video is brought to you by Nebula. Following the Conservatives' defeat at the 2024 general election, it was clear that the Tories needed a new leader. Sunak had led them to their worst defeat in their history, voters had overwhelmingly rejected his leadership, and his colleagues were already firing up the engines on their campaign machines. Many of us expected that this leadership election would be swift, and that the new leader would become obvious in the weeks following July the 4th. However, this wasn't the case. After a week-long battle, the Backbench 1922 committee came to the decision that a long leadership election would be preferable, and swiftly published the timetable for it. Essentially, the plan was to whittle down the candidates to 4 in time for the party conference in Birmingham in September. This would give them the time to set out their stall in speeches and events, and also give the conference itself a purpose beyond dissecting the reasons behind the general election defeat. Then, a couple of weeks after conference, MPs reduced the number of candidates from 4 to 2, giving the roughly 170,000 strong membership the rest of October to vote on the final 2 candidates. It's expected that the new leader will be announced on the 2nd of November. Now, as you've probably noticed, we're right in the middle of the contest, and MPs have just selected the 2 final candidates that are imminently to be put to the Tory membership. So in this video, we're going to have a look briefly at how we got here, who the remaining 2 candidates are, and which of them is the most likely to become the next leader of the Conservative Party. Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop and be notified when we release new videos. The leadership election started with 6 candidates putting their names forward. Robert Jenrick, Kemi Badenoch, James Cleverly, Tom Tugendhat, Mel Stride and Priti Patel. The first candidate to be ejected was former Home Secretary Priti Patel, who garnered only 14 nominations. While she's seen as a right-winger, she's not really been operating at the top of politics since she was Home Secretary, and failed to really build a base of support among her colleagues. It also didn't help that the candidate field was dominated by right-wingers, so her personal right-wing brand failed to stand out. Next to be kicked out was Mel Stride, the least recognisable of the candidates. He's never had a cabinet position, nor a particularly senior role within the government, and hasn't really championed a policy platform in a similar way to some of the other candidates. So, with these 2 gone, we were left with the final 4, which was, this week, reduced to 2. On Tuesday, Tom Tugendhat was eliminated, and then James Cleverly was eliminated on Wednesday. In the case of Tom Tugendhat, he probably suffered from the fact that, like Stride, he also hasn't held a cabinet position. However, he had dedicated a lot more time to building a brand. He stood in previous Tory leadership elections and has really tried to brand himself as the serious outsider. A man who served in Afghanistan and Iraq and who can't be attached to the failures of the previous government. A good example of him playing into both of these was his reaction to the government's deal with Mauritius over the Chagos Islands. He criticised leadership rival James Cleverly for starting these discussions. He also attacked leadership rival Robert Jenrick for his statement that UK Special Forces are killing rather than capturing terrorists, burnishing his military credentials. Unfortunately for Tugendhat, this wasn't enough. Now, it's worth saying that Tugendhat being voted out wasn't that much of a surprise, since he wasn't considered a big figure within the party, and he appealed to more moderate Conservatives, whose influence has waned since the general election. What was a shock, though, was Cleverly's exit from the race. Cleverly is seen as a moderate, and someone who would be competent as leader of the party. As a moderate, he seemed like the most likely candidate to win back centrist voters who the Tories lost to the Lib Dems. He has vast experience in government too, having been Foreign Secretary and then Home Secretary under Rishi Sunak. Prior to the Conservative Party conference, Cleverly was only the 3rd favourite to win, and at times had even dropped below Tugendhat. After conference though, his support skyrocketed, and he became the 2nd favourite amongst the Tory membership. Not only did 42% of Conservative members say he delivered the best speech at the conference, but 55% also said that the party conference made them more likely to support him. So there was evidence that Cleverly had momentum going into the next stage of the race. This membership-wide support also seemed to translate into support amongst party MPs. After the Tuesday vote, in which Tugendhat was ousted, Cleverly was way out in front on 39 votes, ahead of both Jenrick on 31 votes and Badenoch on 30 votes. As such, Cleverly's perceived chances of winning the leadership election surged. The bookies steadily changed their odds. At the start of the conference on the 30th of September, Cleverly's implied probability of winning was only 10%. By this week though, this had soared to 44%, to the point that Cleverly's chances were level with Robert Jenrick. What we're saying is, it seemed a given that Cleverly would go through to the final two, and that the next vote was more to decide who would go up against him in the members' vote. As such, it seemed a handful of MPs, instead of voting directly for Cleverly, instead voted for their second preference, wrongly assuming that Cleverly was safe. In fact, some journalists have even suggested that the Cleverly team deliberately lent votes to Jenrick to try and ensure it was him that got through to the final, not Badenoch. If true, this has backfired in a truly spectacular way. Now, this apparent game playing meant that Cleverly actually lost 2 MP votes compared to Tuesday. Jenrick gained 10 and Badenoch gained 12. So the final vote tally was as follows. Badenoch came first with 42 votes, Jenrick came second with 41 votes, and Cleverly came third with 37 votes. Thereby, Cleverly, despite effectively being the favourite, was eliminated. Over the next month, the Tory membership will choose between Badenoch and Jenrick. Now, it's worth pointing out here that both of these candidates are on the right of the party. Badenoch has been an outspoken critic on transgender issues, and as Equalities Minister proposed a law to ensure same-sex toilets in all public buildings. She also got into something of a public spat with the 10th and 14th Doctor David Tennant over such issues. While Robert Jenrick is also now seen as a right-winger, having been the only candidate to suggest having a referendum on leaving the ECHR, this wasn't always the case. For a long time, he was presumed to be a moderate, and only recently has he undergone something of a conversion to the right of the party. So it doesn't look like the membership will have as much choice as the conventional wisdom would have suggested, with them now having to decide which of the right-wingers they want as their leader for the next 5 years. Exactly which leader the Tory membership will go for, though, is not yet certain. We'll be making videos on what happens over the next month, so be sure to check that out. The thing is, this isn't the only big election that's worth paying attention to at the moment. Just over the pond, we have the US election in full swing, and like the Tory leadership election, that has been chaotic as well. Luckily, we've been paying close attention to it, and we've been documenting it in WTF USA, our slightly tongue-in-cheek look at the US election.
WTF USA is our slightly tongue-in-cheek look at the US election. Each week, we dive into the online discourse, explain the politics behind the stories, and tell you if you really need to pay attention. For example, in recent episodes, we've talked about Trump's foray into the world of crypto, claims of dog eating, and AI-generated Musk memes. These might sound stupid, but they actually tell us a lot about the candidate's economic plans, the state of post-truth politics, and how the US feels about its deficit. That is to say, WTF USA brings you the wildest moments from the 2024 election, tells you the hidden political meaning behind each of them, and then if you can just ignore the chaos, or if you should follow along. New videos come out every Friday only on Nebula. That's the streaming service we've built alongside a bunch of our creator friends, and where you can find all kinds of superb content like WTF. We're super proud of WTF USA, and we hope that with your support, we'll be able to make other interesting, weird, and entertaining series with Nebula in the future. So signing up genuinely helps TLDR to grow and expand. As I say, it's not just WTF either. There's a whole bunch of other original content on the service, from creators like Real Life Law, Wendover Productions, and Neo. You can also watch every normal TLDR video ad-free on Nebula as well, and in some instances, before they land on YouTube. If you're not a member already, click the link in the description to get 40% off. That's just $30 for a year, or $2.50 a month. We really hope you check out the series, and as always, thanks for your support.